My name is Jerm. This is Germ Warfare, the battle of ideas.
One of my favorite people in the world, Stuart Fischbein. Thank you for joining me in the trenches.
It's very kind of you to say that, Jeremy. It's really kind of you. I mean, we've known each other for. Well, thank you. I mean, I can't wait to meet you in person.
Yes. Well, exactly. The feeling is mutual. And I say that because, well, let me repeat the story. I've said it before, but for those who are listening who might not know the story, you've had a significant impact on my personal life. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to quickly go through the story.
It's not what you think, people.
But it was maybe, shall we say, 2.5 years ago. I can't even remember exactly when it was. But anyway, we were driving back from the Kruger National Park, and my wife was pregnant at the time. And so you have to understand that she is in the medical field. So for her to change her views is a lot harder for somebody like me, because she's stuck within that paradigm. And initially, when she fell pregnant, she was very petrified. This is going to be scary. Everything that Hollywood tells you is what we thought, and we didn't know any better until we started reading or listening, shall I say, to the audiobook written by Catherine Graves, who I think you might know or know of, and this was on the road trip. And then we finished the book, and she looked on her phone for some podcasts about hypnobirthing or just home birthing or anything that went against the mainstream narrative. And she stumbled across this guy called Dr. Stu. And she said, well, let's take a listen to this. And she randomly pulled up some podcasts of yours, and we started listening, and we kept on listening. We just found them so appealing. And eventually, it became apparent to us that what we had previously thought was bunk. And in the car, she said to me, you have to get Dr. Stu onto your podcast. And that's exactly what happened. And you very kindly took up the offer. This was a couple of years ago, and you kind of, in a very far away manner, were part of our journey, because our journey was completely different to what we had thought was going to be the journey, and it was so much better than anything we had planned. And Stu, and so that's why you're one of my favorite people in the world, because you personally had a huge impact on the birth of my son. And now my wife's pregnant with another boy.
No, I think that I'm honored by what you're saying, and it is tragic. I just got done with an interview this morning with a woman from England who deals with birth trauma, and so many women, they all love their babies, but many of them, actually some of them have no memory of the birth of their babies because they were put out, but many women have traumatic birth stories, and it's so unnecessary, and it does affect your psychology when you had a traumatic experience. And the fact that what you're saying, you listening to me and Bliss, and making the experience, no matter how it ended, a better experience, so that it's a good memory for you and your wife, that means everything to me. Because we're not, the medical model of pregnancy care is not doing well. And when you said something about you listened to everything you've been told had been bunk or something, I think that's what you said. It's actually mostly true. Mostly true. The mainstream narrative about birth, whether it's normal pregnancy, whether it's twins, whether it's women over 35, is bunk. It really isn't. It isn't true. And yet it is propagated over and over again as the mainstream narrative. And what I'm trying to do, and many people like me are trying to get the word out there, because taking the joy and pleasure out of this life-changing experience, this thing that a woman's body is designed to do, this birthright that she has, and making it into this scary thing filled with fear and anxiety, we're not doing mankind a service. So if I in any way made your life better, your family's life better, There's nothing more that you could say that would honor me.
Well, it is exactly that. You did play a big role. And here's the thing, though, Stu. We were on our way back from the Kruger National Park, which is, I always argue, one of the best game parks in the world. And when we were there, she said to me in the car, have you ever wondered why these mammals don't give birth in a hospital? They find a quiet place behind a tree or in a bush or somewhere, and they'll go and give birth. Why do we, as humans, go to a loud, noisy hospital where there are loads of people who are just poking and prodding and making everything seem more scary?
You want a simple answer to that question?
Yeah, sure.
Money.
But you were there, though. You were in that space.
Yeah. But it's driven. Even in countries with socialized medicine, the system just bills the government for what they do. So the more they do, the more they make. It's as simple as that. And it was done purposefully. I don't know the history of South African obstetrics, but it probably mirrors what happened in the United States, which was in 100 years ago, 95% of women were born at home. Babies were born at home. And within 30 years, 90+% of women gave birth in the hospital. So what happened in those 30 years? Did birth suddenly collapse? Was there a disaster? Was there a natural disaster that caused people to have to go to? No. There was a propaganda campaign fueled by big pharma and big medicine. In our country, it was fueled by the Rockefellers, who own Standard Oil. All the petroleum products make pharmaceutical products. They put out a report called the Flexner Report, which people can look it up, and they can find out that what that Flexner Report did was vilify all things that came before, like naturopathy and midwifery and homeopathy and chiropractic, and said that the only way to do medicine was to do it through a medical cartel or a medical organized control, and that they were going to do it better. And it was essentially like anything else. They sold us, like they sold us with COVID. They sold us with anything. They sold us with SSRIs. They sold us with statins for cholesterol. They put on these big things. And then 20, 30 years later, they come out and they realize that, none of this stuff made sense, but somebody made a lot of money off of it. And once they get control of something like that, they're not just going to let go. And the reason I can say this bluntly is because, first of all, I've lived in both worlds. Spent a lot of time in the hospital. I was medically trained. I came out very medicalized. And then I ended up evolving into a home birth obstetrician working with midwives. But all you have to do, Jeremy, is look at outcomes. If any sane person who runs a business, if what they're doing, their sales are falling, they're going to revamp their business. They're going to try to figure out what's wrong. If people are not coming to the restaurant anymore because their sandwiches suck, they're going to try to make better sandwiches. But in business, that's not what happened. And it happens, they try to quash the other sandwich shops. They don't try to necessarily improve their product. This is what's happened. They've not improved their product. They've created more of the same thing that made it bad in the first place. More interventions, more testing, more labs, more monitoring, more inductions, more cesarean sections, all those things without creating any improvement in outcomes over the general population. Yes, everyone can look at a single case now and then and say, listen, if it wasn't for the hospital, I or my baby would have died. And that's 100% true. But all the damage they're doing to the women that didn't need that sort of intervention that ends up going from a C-section rate in your country 50 years ago. We talked about this last time, of 5%, and now it's close. You said it's closing in on 80% in your country.
Yeah. I think it's one of the highest in the world.
Yeah. What is that doing to the babies, the moms' future babies, the epigenetics, the ability of these young babies being born to these moms, of having babies themselves? No one cares, because you can't really study it. It's messy. It's nebulous. All we care about is neonatal morbidity and neonatal mortality. And even that isn't getting better. With a 700 or 800% increase in the cesarean section rate, your neonatal mortality should get better. It's not.
But Stu, isn't it about getting the baby out?
Well, to them it is, yeah. But how a baby is born matters. And one of the things they don't consider is nature's design. As you were talking about being at the wild animal park, you know, watching, or you don't get to see them because they're hiding, but when a mammal prepares to give birth, she goes off to a quiet place by herself. No one takes away her food and water. No one interrupts her. That's what they do. Babies have to navigate the birth canal, and there's a system of that. There's a communication going on all through pregnancy between the mother and the baby. That communication is hormonal. It's electromagnetic. It's things we don't understand. And then when the baby decides it's time to come out, something in the baby or the placenta triggers mom to go into labor. That's still mysteriously understood, and I'm really thrilled that we don't understand that, because pretty soon there'll be a pill that just says, take this pill and it'll trigger labor. I mean, they already tried it with Cytotec and Pitocin and Foley balloons and all kinds of different things they use to induce labor. But if they ever discover it, they'll come up with a pill and they'll charge a lot of money for that. And then every woman at 38 weeks will start taking this pill to try to go into labor, because they'll be gaslit to believe that if they go longer than that, their baby will die in utero, and all these scary things that they use to manipulate people. But when a mammal does all those things, the baby has to navigate that. So there's reflexes. The baby is exposed to the stresses of labor, and it's communicating with its mom. That may help prepare it for later in life and dealing with stress in life. The baby gets exposed to mother's bacteria and what we call the microbiome. And that sets us up for our immune system. 80% of your immune system is based on gut bacteria, which you acquire through the birth canal when you're taken out through an abdominal incision in a sterile field. That's altered. And this is just a simple statement. It's always true. Every time you mess with nature's design, there will be downstream consequences. Rarely will they be good. Sometimes they'll be almost invisible. Sometimes they may take years to determine, but there will be downstream consequences. Nature isn't stupid. Designed this system of conceiving a baby, growing a baby in the hormonal milieu that we're in, a woman's uterus, not a pregnant person's uterus, okay? With all the blood supply and all the hormones and all the things that mother and baby are sharing, to then grow to a 9 months gestation. You know, it's a lot shorter in hamsters. I don't know what it is. I think elephants, it's a year and a half. It's a long time. It takes a long time to grow, make it proper, but nature designed it that way. And then when it's ready, then nature does its thing to bring it out. And then the idea that we need to immediately cut a cord, or that we need to take a baby away from its mother. In nature, by the way, cords often snap in nature, and the babies don't bleed to death. But if the cord doesn't snap, nobody rushes in to cut the cord, and nobody ever takes the baby away from the mother. Nature, you wouldn't do that. Yet, as you said earlier, everything that's done in the hospital seems antithetical to that. Why do we do that? Why? Again, if a woman gives birth at home, how much money does the hospital make? If a baby doesn't go to the nursery or the NICU, how much money does the hospital make? People think that that's cynical. I don't think your audience will, because your audience is already suspicious about life in general. But there's no money in not meddling.
What was that documentary called?
The Business of Being Born?
Yeah, that's great. We watched that. I think it's Ricky Lake.
Yeah, The Business of Being Born. Ricky and Abby Epstein.
It's actually a very good documentary.
It's like 14 years old now or whatever, and it's still perfectly relevant. Nothing has changed for the better. If anything, the things on there, they could add more to this stupid stuff that they're doing. Right. People should watch it so they understand. Do we think it's better? In my generation, Jeremy, they did something called twilight sleep. You may have heard of it, maybe not. But what they did was, when women got to completely dilated, they gassed them, they put them out, and they pulled babies out with forceps. So people like my mom had no memory of my birth because she wasn't awake when I was born. The baby goes to the nursery. Maybe 2 hours later, I come back to my mom, wrapped up like a burrito.
Wow.
Okay.
You know, I remember...
not bonding, not delayed cord clamping, not skin to skin, not the hormonal connection that's going on between mom and baby, that flood of oxytocin that mom is putting out, that she's seeing this offspring, the thing that she just created, all taken away in the idea that that was a good idea. Somebody thought that was a good idea. Okay, the arrogance of these people, the stupidity of these people, knows no bounds. It makes me, I'm at the point now in my career where I'm angry with the fact that these people are still, not those people in general, they're dead, but the people like them are still in charge of this system. It's insane that they continue to do more stuff, outcomes continue to get worse, and they continue to get paid more for what they're doing because they're doing more stuff. And they continue to then fight against anyone who wants to change the system. Like in my country, 98+% of babies are born in the hospital. What is the American Hospital Association and the American College of OBGYN busy with? They're busy with attacking the 1% of women who are giving birth at home, trying to make it harder for them to give birth at home. Why? I think it's a competitive marketing thing. They see the writing on the wall that they suck. And instead of doing a mea culpa, they want to squash the potential competition. It's more complicated than that, but in the time we have and stuff like that, that's basically it. We live in a world where we're not doing well, and we could do so much better. I was fortunate enough to see my career take a different path. And I saw what's possible when collaboration between midwives who know normal, healthy birthing better than OBs do, and OBs who know problems better than maybe midwives do, work together and collaborate. And let the midwives take care of the low-risk women who don't have a problem, and let the doctors take care of the things that they're trained to take care of, which are problem birth. And instead of just saying that, what the medicalized birth model, the maternal fetal medicine model, is trying to do is they're trying to label all pregnant women to be high risk. And if everyone's high risk, then no one should be able to have a midwife or be at home. And they've been very successful at it because they have a big lobbying thing, and they have the ear of the politicians and in the ear of the news media. And when in my country, I don't know what your college is there, but in my country, when ACOG speaks or when the American Medical Association speaks, journalists just bend over and take it and say, well, that must be true, when it couldn't be further from the truth. It's a mess.
You actually put out a paper that we read back in the day that compared home births to hospital births, and they're on par in terms of mortality.
I didn't put out a paper comparing the two. That was not me. I might have promoted one. There are many great studies out there that look at the difference between home birth and hospital birth for women who are considered low risk. And every single one of them finds that the home birth, the outcomes in pretty much everything from emotional trauma to physical trauma to vaginal delivery rate to shorter labors to less babies going to the intensive care unit, to less blood loss. The home births were better than the hospital births. Yet those articles are ignored. I've published papers on the success rate of home birthing for things that may not be considered low risk by the standard medical community, such as breaches in twins. And I put out the fact that, again, I believe that the medicalized birth model run by maternal fetal medicine doctors mostly handles breaches in twins all wrong. And they would, 98% of breaches are done by C-section, 75% of twins are done by C-section. We had a section rate with twins of 8.7%. And we had a section rate of of 0% for multiparous women with a breech baby, and about 16% with first-time moms with a breech baby. Yet in the hospital model, 98% of them will get a C-section. In our model, 16% got a C-section. And I'm the outlier. I'm the one that needs to be shut up. That's the kind of thing that, again, it's classic cognitive dissonance remediation. It's too hard for them to look and see that the system that they're involved in is not working. So, and rather than say, we failed, they basically call us crazy, or they cherry pick the data that supports their position and ignore the data that doesn't, or they blame the system. I'd love to help a woman with a breech baby, but my partners or my hospital system won't let me. So, God, where's your courage?
Yeah.
It's the rarest of traits, courage, and most OBs don't have it. And by the way, the way they're taught now, I know I'm going off on a tangent, which you like when I do this, but the way they're taught now is to be sheep, not shepherd. Who teaches OBs in residency programs? Well, they're the high-risk maternal fetal medicine specialists. Who benefits when an OB doesn't know how to take care of something high risk? The maternal fetal medicine specialist does. They're creating more jobs. It's a simple. I know my mind just gets ahead of myself, but imagine if a fireman got paid by each fire they put out. How many firemen would kind of think about maybe starting some fires? How many firemen would become arsonists if you got paid? Hey, honey, we need to buy that new car. Let's go burn down Mr. Johnson's barn. Okay, why wouldn't they do that? What's going to hold them back? Ethics, morals? Well, if people were to read the guidelines on medical ethics, they would find that every day in every doctor's office, in every hospital, they violate them constantly. So they don't mean anything. These things are all words without meaning. And they're used to manipulate us and funnel us down a path that system wants us to take. This is very depressing news for people who just want to trust their medical community and trust their doctor. But I'm telling you, you can't, because your doctor, if your doctor's either complicit or he's just a hamster in a wheel.
But the problem, Stu, we've got close friends who are pregnant, and she's petrified of birth. In actual fact, she has an elective C-section. She's already got the date. It's not supposed to be like that.
No, it's not. Your country has really done a number on its women. You can't have an 80% C-section rate and not convince women that it's safer. So they've done a great job with propaganda and gaslighting to the point where a woman doesn't enjoy her pregnancy. And what is that doing to her?
But she's actually scared.
Right. No, So what is that doing to her? What is that doing to her ability to be a good mother? What is that doing to the biochemistry that's going on in her body? What is that doing to the epigenetics of the fetus that's developing inside of her? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I do. You do. But the medical system doesn't care. They don't care what happens to that baby a year down the road, or 20 years old, or 30 years old, or if the baby's dysfunctional or has ADHD or wets its bed or can't relate to people, doesn't make eye contact, is mildly autistic. They don't care. There's no paper that looks downstream at these models and says, our kids were a lot healthier when we had a C-section rate of 5% than when we have a C-section rate of 80%. Our society was healthier. Our moms were healthier. Because they always blame it out. It's too muddled. There's too many factors. You can't isolate this as one thing. Well, I can just go back to the thing. When nature designed a system to work a certain way, only the hubris of man in the last 100 years has decided that he or she knows better. And we get what we deserve. We're going to end up where we end up.
But just for balance, though, you're not saying that there's no need for the hospital.
No, of course not. Hospitals can't survive if they only took care of the 15 or 20% of women who need them. They need the revenue that comes in from all the normal people who they treat as abnormal. No, we need hospitals. Listen, you don't need a hospital if you cut yourself on a fence, right? But if you get an infection in the cut, or if you hit an artery, then you need an urgent care or a hospital. So we need hospitals, but nobody would go to growing a baby is like, I've said this to you last time, I think, it's like breathing or digestion. It's a normal function of the body. You don't have to think about it. Conception occurs whether you think about it or not. Growing a baby grows whether you think about it or not. Going to labor will happen if you let it, whether you think about it or not. In fact, the more you think about it, the more likely you are to delay labor because your cortical brain takes over your primitive bodily functions. It's very similar to breathing or digestion. Fortunately, we can go through our day and not think once about breathing. But imagine if you had to remember to breathe every 4 seconds. I mean, that would be crazy. But your higher mind can screw up your breathing. Why do people hyperventilate? They hyperventilate because they're nervous. They got to go to court. They got to give a speech. Why do people get diarrhea? I mean, sometimes it's pathology, but a lot of times it's caused by the fact that you've got to go to court, or you've got to give a speech. And so you get an upset stomach. That's your cortical brain screwing up your body's normally functions. When a woman starts to get fearful about her pregnancy, it's far more likely to become a self-fulfilling prophecy that you're going to end up with a problem. And if I was a fireman who wanted to make more money per fire, I'd start fires. If I was a maternal fetal medicine doctor who makes more money off of doing more scans and more consults, why would I not want women to be scared? I mean, the only thing that's keeping them from that would be ethics. And I'm telling you that we've been fooled to believe that medical ethics is actually not an oxymoron. So hospitals are necessary for the women that need that have a problem, and they do great work when there's trauma. There's no better place to be if you have a car accident or a heart attack than going to a hospital. But going there for something as normal as having a baby,
Yeah, exactly. And something that you said a number of years ago is that giving birth is not a medical condition. That completely rewired my thinking.
You're right. I mean, it's a normal bodily function. It's like any other bodily function I just mentioned. It's not a medical condition. Giving birth is the only thing women go to the hospital for that isn't a disease. I've also been on this kick lately about how hospitals are designed. Think about this for a second. When you go to the hospital, pregnant or in labor, what's the first thing they do? They make you go to the bathroom, pee in a cup, put on a hospital gown, and then you come back to the room, and what do? You get into bed. Okay. And then they draw your blood, and then they start an IV, and then they have you sign consent forms, not necessarily in that order. And then they put the belts on you, and you're laboring, and you're in bed. Now, think about it for a second. Why is the bed the center of the labor room? Well, it's a hospital. Hospitals are designed by architects. Architects go to architectural school to learn how to design hospitals. What do they do? They're supposed to take care of sick people. Where do sick people go? In bed. So what are we going to design every room in the hospital, every patient room in the hospital? It's going to be designed to have a bed in it. And the bed's going to be in the center of the room. And there are going to be lights that focus on the bed. And there's going to be machines that go beep on each side of the bed. And that's how it's designed. But architects don't know anything about a woman laboring. Hospital administrators don't care about how a woman labors. How does a woman normally labor? How does any mammal normally labor? Do they lay in bed? When you go to a home birth, when you go to in the wild, of course they don't have beds. So let's just stick to home birth. When you go to a home birth, I can just tell you, because I've been to many, and most of my medical colleagues had never been to one, you almost never find the woman in bed. She'll be up, she'll be pacing, she'll be in the shower, she'll be getting her hips squeezed, she'll be getting rebozoed, she may be leaning on the bed, but she's not just laying in bed.
In the bath, maybe.
Is not, what's that?
In the bath, perhaps?
In water, that sort of thing. Yes, that's where she's going to be. So why do the hospitals design labor rooms to have the bed in the center of the room? Because their mindset is that you're sick. And that when you come into the hospital, they put you in a hospital gown. What does a hospital gown signify? You're a patient. Patients are sick. Why does a woman need to wear a hospital gown when she's in labor? Why can't she wear nothing? Or why can't she wear her own jammies? She can wear whatever she wants, whatever she's comfortable in. They put them in a hospital gown. Again, many more women are starting to, maybe not your country, they're starting to pull back from this, saying, no, I don't want that. I don't need that. I don't need an IV right now. Well, what happens if you start bleeding? And then you say, well, if I came in with a gunshot wound or a severed artery in a car accident, you get an IV in me and you transfuse me with O negative blood. It's not like I go out to dinner every night, put an IV in before I leave my house just in case. They'll say, well, it's more likely you might need something. Yeah, well, it's more likely because of the way you treat me in the hospital. Plus, you can't bill me for an IV if I don't have one. Think about this for a second. They draw blood on you. Do we draw blood on people when we go to a home birth? Nope. Do we start an IV when we go to a home birth automatically? Nope. Do we interrupt them? Do we make them sign consent forms? Nope. Do we make them pee in a cup? Nope. And yet somehow those mothers and babies generally do great. And they all live for the most part.
I don't know if I told you. But when my wife was pregnant, previous time, we went to hypnobirthing classes. Now, the word I think is quite unfortunate because it makes it sound very woo-woo and weird and everything, but it really isn't. And if anybody's interested, I think hypnobirthing is a really, really, really good concept. It's just basically about getting your mind in the right place. That's all. And the lady,
body, by the way, and body, getting your mind and body.
Yeah,
you really want to get your body in tune with your pregnancy. Having, the mind controls the body. And one of the hardest things for most of us who live in this society right now is to shut our minds down and let our body just be, and trust our body to do our thing without too much thinking. Your friend who's actually fearful of birth, this is very detrimental to her.
It'll be more painful as a result. Probably.
Well, she'll probably just get an epidural. She won't.
Oh, right.
Yeah, of course, yes. She'll just get a spinal and have a C-section, and the recovery will be slower. But it's kind of like, you plant these seeds in women, and it really benefits the system. Who benefits, by the way, from all those interventions I talked about when you show up at the hospital? And who benefits from women being frightened about birth? Not the family. The system benefits because you're compliant now. They'll do you'll do what they want. It's like in the movie Inception. I don't know if they made it to. It's really one of my favorite movies. There's a scene where they talk about planting this idea into the Cillian Murphy's head, is the actor, and they say, well, why can't we just suggest it to him? And he said, because then he'll know where it came from. And they go, what do you mean? And he says, well, okay, don't think about elephants. Everybody's thinking about elephants. So when you say to a woman, you're over 35, pregnancy is scary, we need to monitor this. You've just basically planted seeds in there that are almost impossible to remove. And my colleagues who do this kind of thing, who do this kind of counseling, if you want to call it that, do they know what they're doing? Do they understand what they're doing to destroy this beautiful event for that woman? And do they care? And by their actions, the answer is pretty obvious that either they don't know what they're doing and don't care, which is bad, or they know what they're doing and don't care, which is even worse. So the answer is these people, unfortunately, are not to be trusted with every pregnant woman's care. Women should go there to doctors and maternal fetal medicine specialists when there is a true problem. And the best people to decide that are the experts in normal birthing, which are generally midwives who are traditionally trained. The other thing that the medical community is doing now is they're trying to medicalize midwifery. They're trying to take over the term midwifery, like in places like Canada and some states, a woman who's not licensed by the state cannot use the word midwife to describe herself. Now, since when did governments get to take over the language and decide who can be called a midwife and who can't? I don't know. So they come up with new titles now. They're called traditional birth companion or traditional birth attendant, but they just can't use the word. And that's crazy because it's just language. You're just manipulating language. You're not fixing the problem.
Yeah, so I mean, I was saying to you, so this woman who was giving us the classes in hypnobirthing, she was telling us when she gave birth, her first child, it was in the hospital. She says it was a traumatic experience. She hated it. Her second child, she decided to do at home. So she got a midwife to the house, and the midwife was in the lounge talking to her husband, and she was sitting on the toilet because that was the best place to be for that motion. Mm-hmm. And then she stood up and held the door and actually just gave birth right there in the bathroom while the midwife was talking to the husband. And then she said 45 minutes later, she was in the kitchen making a chicken curry.
What you're describing is the normal experience at a home birth. There's always things that can go wrong, which is why I respect a woman's right to free birth. And when the choice is limited between free birthing or going to the hospital and that tyranny that's there, I understand why women choose free birth. But the insanity of a government is to say, well, a woman can give birth at home, but if anyone who's qualified to help her comes, that's a crime. And there are many states in my country and probably countries in the world that do that. I know that they, like Armenia, outlaws home birth. Now, if a woman gives birth at home, I don't think she goes to jail. But if somebody comes to help her, that person is committing a crime. Now, that's crazy. Mm. By the way, your grandmother or your neighbor can help you have a baby, but a midwife who's trained can't in these countries or these states. Why do we give any power to people who make decisions like that? Who are these people? You know, they don't know anything. Most politicians know nothing about this. They just do what the lobbyists or what their benefactors tell them to do. And who is the benefactors? They're the big medical organizations, the hospital associations, the medical organizations, the obstetrical organizations. They're the ones with the money. They're the ones that lobby. And some guy who's a lawyer who happens to be a legislator in your Congress, he doesn't know anything about birth, so he's going to do what these experts tell him. But these people are not experts. Because to me, an expert is somebody who consistently is correct, who improves outcomes, that sort of thing. These people are consistently incorrect, and they're not improving outcomes. And yet, because they have letters behind their name, they're considered experts. Okay? I have the same letters behind my name, and I think completely differently than them. Why? Am I not an expert because I think differently? Yes, I would be labeled a crazy person, because that's how you dismiss people with ideas as opposed to debating them or engaging them in conversation. You don't ever see this sort of debate going on. I think we've talked about this before. Wouldn't it have been nice during COVID for the leaders of your country to get people who were pro-vaccine, pro-lockdown, on stage, on television, with people who thought that lockdowns were not a good idea, bad for kids, that some people don't need the vaccine, that ivermectin might be a good choice as opposed to hospitalization, remdesivir, intubation, and death, and have them debate live. But you never see the so-called experts have a conversation with people who disagree with them. They're too uncomfortable. I have a saying that says, not my skepticism that should bother you, it's their certainty. And people who are confident in their position, like me, admit we don't know stuff. People who are insecure will act like they know everything. And they'll if you ask them something outside of their comfort zone, they'll roll their eyes, or they'll ridicule you, or they'll say, home delivery is for pizza, or you wouldn't want your baby to die, would you? Or
but there you go. But that also, that feeds into the vaccine thing. So as you know, our child and our next child won't be they're not vaccinated. But the other subtle one is the vitamin K one. Many people don't know about vitamin K. We also have avoided vitamin K. This is something that goes under the radar.
Yeah, there's a big pushback now from the pharmaceutical companies and the press about calling people who talk about why vitamin K may not be necessary as being bringers of misinformation. And the term misinformation is a funny term because there is no such term. Misinformation is information that those people who just don't like the information you're giving. Because if it's true, it still could be misinformation according to them. And if it's not true, then it's a lie. So call it a lie. Say that not giving vitamin K is a reasonable choice. Say, well, that's a lie. Don't call it misinformation, because it's not misinformation. But there's been a pushback because people are beginning to understand that this thing called late onset vitamin K deficiency bleeding, which is a serious thing that happens between 1 in 10,000, 1 in 16,000 children who don't get vitamin K. But that means that there's 15,999 children who don't get this bad outcome. And they don't have high vitamin K either. Babies are born without high vitamin K. Now, again, if you trust nature's design, you have to ask yourself a question. If vitamin K is so important for babies to have that we need to give injections to 16,000 babies to prevent one case of this deficiency, why didn't nature make vitamin K across the placenta and give babies vitamin K when they're born? Because maybe there's a reason it's not supposed to be there. But that's not how it works, because, again, it gets down to money. How much money do you make in not giving 16,000 babies vitamin K? Zero. How much money do you make if you give 16,000 babies vitamin K, of which 15,999 didn't need it? And it might even be detrimental to them because it's changing nature's design. And remember what I said earlier, every time you change nature's design, there will be ripples downstream.
But, sorry, Stu, let me jump in quickly. Correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the reason for the vitamin K injection is because of the deficiency that occurs due to cutting the cord too quickly?
No, I don't think it's due to that. I think that's cutting the cord too quickly deprives the baby of its blood, its iron, its stem cells, many other things. So the oxygen exchange is going on while the baby is transitioning into this new world where it's now using its lungs. It never used them before, and all that. It does a lot of things, but I don't know that early cord cutting affects the incidence of vitamin K deficiency bleeding. I don't think it does.
No, but isn't it because waiting allows more blood to go into the baby and therefore it helps to thicken the blood naturally?
Well, I don't know that again, this is an interesting thing. More blood's going into the baby, but the blood everywhere in that baby, in that cord and in that placenta has the same thickness.
Okay.
It's your hemoglobin, it's your hematocrit. So the hemoglobin inside the placenta blood isn't any different than the hemoglobin inside the baby. Some of the blood as the baby comes through the vagina, or even if it's yanked out through the skin at a C-section, is going to be squeezed out of the baby backwards into the placenta. And so it takes time for that to equilibrate. Now, powers that be have decided that 60 seconds of delayed cord clamping is reasonable. Well, that's something. But I can tell you that 60 seconds is a made-up number. Because if it's 60 seconds, why not 70 seconds? Why not 2 minutes? Why not 3 minutes? And it's because they don't want to wait. They want to move on to the next task. So they decide this is, oh, the baby will get too much blood, and then the blood will be too thick. Well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. Again, I understand the complex thinking that's going on there, and sometimes I applaud that, but sometimes I think we think too much. It's the baby's blood. It belongs in the baby. And what stays in the placenta stays in the placenta, and what goes into the baby goes into the baby, and just let it equilibrate, because that's nature's design. Again, in no other mammal does anyone come in and cut the cord. And again, I know that sometimes it severs, like an elephant falls to the ground, that umbilical cord is gone. Okay. So that baby doesn't get the advantage of delayed cord clamping, but that's nature's design. For humans, that's not how it was designed. For chimpanzees and orangutans and stuff, nobody rushes in to cut the umbilical cord. Why would they do that? The only reason that it was done here was for expediency, is to get that baby over to the warmer, which again, completely unnecessary, so that the nurses can do their thing over at the warmer. They can rub the baby down. They can hyperstimulate the baby, which is not necessary. If you've ever been to a home birth and you leave a baby alone, you can tell rather quickly whether that baby's going to need a little bit of help or not by giving it some time. And if you delay the cord clamping, that blood is coming back into that baby's volume is increasing. It's going to help its lungs expand. It's going to help push fluid out of the lungs. It's going to do all the things that nature designed it to do. When you intervene, you've just changed everything. So you have to ask yourself the question, why are all these intelligent experts intervening all the time? What is it that they're doing? And if they're intervening is so important, how come our outcomes aren't getting better? It's not complicated. It's that simple. Whenever you do an intervention, Jeremy, you should be damn sure that the intervention is safe before you do it. And the problem with our history of obstetrics and medicine in general is that hasn't been the case. We put things out there long before we know if they're safe or not. We've done it, for over 100 years. They used to put mercury in babies' teething powder. That doesn't seem very smart, does it?
Terrible idea.
Yeah, well, they did. And then they did x-rays on women in labor to see if their pelvises were big enough. And they found that that was causing cancer, so they stopped doing that, according to Morrison Wagner, in that documentary you talked about, Business of Being Born. And then they gave some babies, moms had too much nausea and hyperemesis, throwing up, and they gave them a drug called thalidomide. Thalidomide caused limb reduction defects. And then women were having miscarriages, so they gave them another drug called diethylstilbestrol, which caused Mullerian abnormalities, which is the uterus and tubes and vagina in the fetuses, inside the female fetuses, and who knows what it did to the male fetuses, but the female fetuses had problems. Shouldn't they have known this ahead of time? Then they bring in continuous fetal monitoring, saying it's going to prevent cerebral palsy, prevent interpartum death. Over 50 years of use, it hasn't done either of those. All it's done is create more C-sections, more interventions. It hasn't improved outcomes at all. That's what they said it was going to do. They don't know what using Cytotec or using oxytocin Pitocin synthetic. I think it's Syntocin in South Africa. They've never really studied long term what that does to the mother and baby bonding. It saturates the oxytocin receptors. Mom's own oxytocin is no longer reaching the organs that it might need to reach, like the breasts, like the baby's oxytocin receptor. No, there's women like Sarah Buckley who study this, and they come out with some really bright things, and we don't always agree on everything, but nonetheless, we all agree that when you meddle with Mother Nature, you better be damn sure that the meddling is going to do good. Mm. And there are some things in life that we meddle with Mother Nature, like air conditioning. It's nice having air conditioning. It wasn't nature's design. Man designed air conditioning. Now, are there downsides to air conditioning? Yeah, sometimes you get Legionnaire's disease through the air conditioning system. There can be problems. But nonetheless, there are benefits to certain interventions and there are risks. But some of the interventions that we've done in obstetrics, there's been no benefit from. And they keep doing them. And they keep coming up with new ones. And that is classically Einstein's definition of insanity. I have to tell you that the people that are running my profession are bordering on being crazy. They call me crazy.
But
Go
Stu,
ahead.
I think I told you this.
You love getting me going, don't you?
When we met up with a doctor, just as a backup, because I think you know the story. My wife decided to go for a home birth. It wasn't successful, and I remember contacting you and saying it was a failure, and you said no, it was not a failure. But she tried home birth for about 4 hours, and the midwife got a bit nervous by the heartbeat that was dropping down to 80, which she said was just a bit too low for her liking.
Yeah.
And she said, let's get hold of the doctor who was on standby. And so that's what we did. And but when we chatted with him after everything, a few days later, whatever, he said the reason why he talks so much about C-sections is because of lawsuits.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to just talk about the failure thing first because I think it's important. Okay. The reason I said that is because we need to change the narrative of how women feel about their bodies. And your wife did everything right. And sometimes even doing everything right, there's a reason to intervene. So it's not, the term failure is just way too harsh. And if you think you failed, then that's going to haunt you for a long time, if not the rest of your life. So it's really important. And it's not just word salad to come up with saying other terms besides failure. But it's not a word that we like to see used because you want to reaffirm to her all the things she did right. Like she conceived a baby. She grew a baby. The baby was doing great inside of her for 9 months. She took care of herself, and in turn, that takes care of her baby. Those are all successes. Those are all things to be commended.
And he's unvaccinated.
And she didn't succumb to the all that pressure to do that. She did all those things right. And still, despite doing all those things right, some outcomes aren't optimal in the way we want them to be. But it's not a failure. That's why we don't like the term failure to progress is a reason a lot of women go to cesarean section because they're not dilating fast enough. Well, who decides what fast enough is? Well, mankind decided that. Well, that's not, I guess I have to talk about this. Okay, there's something called a labor curve. And it's called the Friedman curve. And everybody knows, in obstetrics knows what it is. Midwives do too. And it's a labor curve. And it basically says that a woman who's having her first baby should dilate at 1 or 1.5 centimeters per hour once she reaches beyond 4 centimeters. They may have changed that to 6 now, but she should dilate at a certain rate. Well, think about basic geometry and how do you get a curve? A curve is the median of a bunch of samples. So you have some people that are laboring slow, some people are laboring fast, some people are laboring medium. You take all those scatter points, you calculate a curve, and the curve runs right up the middle. But now the curve is now being used as the standard of labor speed. But it's the middle, which means 50% of women are naturally labeling slower than that. But using the labor curve means that all 50% of women are laboring too slow. Does anybody think that's logical? That 50% of women labor too slow? No, of course not. So the curve was misused, but it wasn't misused by accident. It was misused on purpose so that they could speed up labor. And they could artificially induce or augment labor. Again, maybe somebody at the beginning thought they were doing good, but they had to understand that after watching it for a while, we're not doing good, but we are generating more revenue because we're using more drugs, more IVs, more nursing. More women are ending up with vacuums or forceps or C-sections. Charge for that. Babies end up going to the NICU. We can charge for that. Moms stay in the hospital for longer. We can charge for that. It's not that complicated. Okay. And then you got into the legal aspect of things, and that is a problem. That's definitely a problem. I mean, rarely do people get sued for wrongful cesarean section. Rarely do people get sued for altering a baby's microbiome so that by age 2, that baby has eczema and ear infections. And theoretically, you could trace it all back to the fact that she had a scheduled C-section as opposed to a long labor and a vaginal delivery, or even a long labor and a cesarean, which is better for the baby because the baby got exposed to some of the stresses of labor, some of the reflexes needed for labor, and ended up with a cesarean, but still got exposed to mom's bacteria for a while with the as she dilated and that sort of thing. But they don't get sued for that. This gets back to my whole thing about the live baby and the bassinet theory, and all that matters to the medical model is that. And how the baby got there and how the mom did and how the baby did and how the mom's future baby does is not the concern of the medical system. Their concern is revenue generation and avoiding liability. And if I was running a hospital, that would be my mantra. My mantra would be that my job is not to give the woman the best experience possible. My job is to make the hospital money and prevent us from getting sued. And having a wonderful birth experience and a vaginal delivery is not the same thing as generating revenue and not getting sued. So their fiduciary duty is not the same as the family or the practitioner who's supposed to have the fiduciary duty to take care of that woman. But now, because most doctors are now employed by the hospital, they have a huge conflict of interest. Because the hospital wants to avoid getting sued and wants to expedite things and wants to generate revenue. And the doctor has an obligation to do what the patient wants, who may not want to do some of the things the hospital wants them to do. But if the doctor doesn't do what the hospital wants, the doctor's fearful that he might get fired. So you've got the legal pressures, the job pressures. All those are antithetical to giving the woman what she wants.
But that's what he said to us. He said, look, it's protocol. Because if something goes wrong, then they'll come back and say, well, did you not follow these steps?
Yeah. Yeah. The term policy or protocol, people have to remember that policies are not laws, and you are not bound by them as a patient. If you're an employee of the hospital, you might be bound by them in one sense, but your ethical obligation might be in conflict with that. That's hard to deal with. But that is a defense that they will use. But that assumes that all women are the same, that all women want the same thing, that all labors are the same. We have a protocol. We have an algorithm. And you have to follow the algorithm. And if you follow the algorithm and something bad happens, we feel like we're okay. But the experience matters too. It's like the whole thing. It's not just the destination; it's the journey too. It's all backwards, Jeremy. It's just the people running the system have run it into the ground. I don't think you could do worse. By the way, I'm not saying this as an experiment. I'm just saying it. If you took 1,000 women in South Africa and had them have medical care through the African obstetrical system, and you took 1,000 women and told them to birth at home with no medical care at all, who would have better outcomes?
Well, I would argue the ones who birth at home. However, they're probably going to choose the hospital because
my point is that it would be very interesting to find out. Yes, some women who have birthed at home might have a very bad outcome they might have avoided if they had been in the hospital. But how many women birth in the hospital, if they would have stayed home, would have had a better outcome? And I can tell you that when you have an 80% C-section rate, and you have a woman who wants 5 kids, and now she's got to deal with a VBAC issue, or maybe have a second C-section and then a third C-section, and then a fourth C-section. You know, every time you have a C-section, you increase the risk to that mother and that mother's future babies from uterine rupture, from placenta accreta, which is, what's called abnormal placentation, from other problems that can occur. So cesarean section is actually just deferring risk. You could argue theoretically that if a woman wants only one baby, that a C-section might be safer. But it is altering the baby's microbiome. It is altering the baby's epigenetics. And again, because that's not measurable, nobody talks about it. People don't get informed. They don't give informed consent when you go to the hospital to the doctor because they don't have enough information to give true informed consent. So when the doctor only feeds them the information like breech is dangerous, C-section is safe. Well, okay, fine. But what's the downsides of C-section? What's the benefits of vaginal breech delivery? Oh, we're not going to talk about those. We don't offer breech delivery anyway. You have to have a C-section. It's fine. It's safe. I've done them for 20 years and never had a problem. That's not giving honest, unbiased, unskewed information, which is what our what our organizations in their ethical guidelines say we must do, and they don't. Yeah, they just don't.
I'm just thinking now, Stu. If I think of our 10 closest female friends who have all had kids, I don't think any of them had natural birth. I don't think any. I think all 10 had
you told me.
C-section.
I think we've talked about this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And I could tell you that I know probably 10 women I could just pick out who've had beautiful home births just because of my life experience. But I would tell you most of my OB colleagues don't see anything wrong with what they're doing because they've never looked elsewhere. I become a home birth advocate, but you know that for the first 24 years of my career, I supported midwifery as a hospital-based obstetrician who took their transports from home, most of which were non-emergent. They were just women who were tired, and an epidural helped them, and then maybe some Pitocin and maybe a vacuum, and they all ended up with vaginal deliveries. Every now and then there was a true emergency that came in. But I'd been backing midwives for 24 years before I started to switch to home birthing. And I have to say, actually 28 years, excuse me. And I have to say that when I decided that I didn't decide, I was kind of forced to leave the hospital. They weren't going to renew my privileges, which is their right to do that. But it was really a nasty reasoning. They just didn't like what I was doing. I made the staff nervous because I was doing things that were outside the scope of what the other doctors were doing. But nonetheless, I had never been to a home birth. 28 years of working with midwives, and I had never been to a home birth. And that's a mistake. And if I could suggest anything to young physicians who are in training or whatever else, is take the opportunity if you can. Go to some home births. Just sit there as Uncle Bob visiting. Don't do anything. Just watch. Sit in the corner. Get permission from the woman, from her midwife, and to go. If you really want an education on birth, if you really want to be really good at your profession, then you need to know what all the options are. Also, get breech training. Even if you go to work for a hospital that won't allow you to do a breech delivery, sometime there's a woman that's going to come in with the baby's feet or butt sticking out of the vagina. You're not going to know what to do. And you're going to panic. And you're either going to pull on that baby or you're going to shove it back up inside and gas her, knock her out completely, and give her a traumatic birth because she didn't know a maneuver that could have got that baby out in 15 or 20 seconds. These are not, obstetricians are supposed to be experts in all things birth. They're not. They're experts in surgical birth and medicalized birth. But if you've never seen a home birth, if you've never seen a woman where you actually have done nothing but sit quietly and listen in another room or caught a breech baby, you can't say that you're an obstetrician. I told you they want to take away the word midwife from midwives, but I don't know how you call yourself an obstetrician when 6% of babies at term are going to be breech and you don't know how to take care of them. That's 1 in every 18 women that walk into your office. 1 in every 17 women. And you're supposed to be an expert and you're not. As somebody who was like OCD and wanted to be the best that I could possibly be, I would have been really furious if in training my mentors, my residency training program didn't teach me how to take care of 1 out of every 17 women who walked into my office. I'd be embarrassed. I'd go after them. I try to change the system. I try to bring back these skills because the women of our community deserve it.
Before we promote your podcast, Stu, I just quickly want to give a shout out to some of the other names who had a big influence. Catherine Graves, I mentioned at the beginning of this conversation. I would strongly recommend anybody read her books on hypnobirthing. What is the name of that woman? I've now gone blank. Who became the face of the sort of hippie?
Ina May Gaskin.
That's it. That's her.
She wrote Spiritual Midwifery, and she read and a couple other books. Mm-hmm.
We've got that book. Yeah, we read that book together. It's an incredible. It's an incredible. Yeah, very.
She wrote
inspiring.
it a long time ago.
Yeah,
and I'm happy to report that lately I think she's doing appearances again. For a while she wasn't, and I'm thrilled.
I think she's quite old now.
We all are. Yeah,
no, but I think she must be. I think she's in the 80s or even close to 90.
In the 70s she must have been 20. So that means, I was actually around that age too. She's a little older. She's older than me. She's got to be in her mid 70s or late 70s, probably. Right.
But her book, did she write that book, or is it a book about her? I can't remember, but it's a collection of stories all related to her.
Well, she and the midwives from the farm in Tennessee wrote the book. From what I understand, she got permission to put her name on the book, but it doesn't matter who wrote it. She's responsible for it, and she deserves credit. She deserves credit, as do all the pioneers of her age, who ran out of gas in Tennessee. They left San Francisco on a bus, and they were just going across country, and they ran out of gas in Tennessee, and that's where they put down roots. The famous farm.
I can promise you now, if you read some of those stories about those births, it will certainly make you feel better about your pregnancy.
Yeah, well, they trusted women, and they trusted the bodies in those times. And by the way, in the 70s, I mean, even obstetrical, even though there were, twilight sleep and forceps and vacuums, I mean, the C-section rate was only 5%. So it's only gotten worse since the 70s. And again, I know that there's lots of reasons for that, but one of the reasons I put on that was the formation of the specialty of high-risk obstetrics. I'm waiting for somebody from the Society of Maternal Fetal Medicine to try to refute what I'm saying. But they were founded in 1977. They're an American organization, but their influence is worldwide. And ever since 1977, everything about obstetrics has gotten worse. There have been individual cases where they've done wonderful things. But, in 1970, about 1 in 3 women had an ultrasound. Now, rarely does a woman make it through pregnancy without 4, 5, 6 ultrasounds. Every one of those ultrasounds is a billable charge. Okay? If you label every woman high risk, you create large volume of clientele. Look, I compare this. There's a little bit of medical history is really interesting. Do you know that prior to the mid 80s, a cholesterol under 300 was considered fine? Okay. Then in 1987, the American Heart Association changed the cholesterol level from 300 down to 240. Why did they do that in 1987? Do you know, Jeremy?
Probably because of the low-fat diet that came out.
No, close. It was because Lipitor was invented.
Oh.
It's a statin.
Yes.
And it was designed to lower your cholesterol. So by lowering the level from 300 down to 240, did they improve outcomes? No. But they got 40, 50 million more people that could be labeled as having high cholesterol, doctors could then write out a prescription for Lipitor. And then somewhere in the 2000s, they lowered it to 200. Again, creating another 20, 30, 40 million people in my country who are now labeled as high cholesterol. This is what they do. They don't improve outcomes. They find more ways to generate revenue. And that's what the maternal fetal medicine specialist has done. Because if they say they're improving outcomes, then how come they're not improving outcomes? How come we're not seeing a statistical improvement in our babies? We're seeing, by the way, in the last 20 years, there's been a doubling of NICU admission rates, newborn intensive care unit admission rates. In the last 30 years, the rate of postpartum hemorrhage has doubled. It's doubled. Why? If we're doing so good, maybe it's because of what we're doing that's causing those things. But they don't look at that stuff. They never want to look at that stuff. They only want to look at that 1% of people that are birthing at home. And let's go after those crazy traditional midwives who aren't following our protocols.
And something that really bothers me is seeing all those babies in those little cubicle things. I remember when our boy was born. Obviously, as I said earlier, the home birth turned out to, we had to go to the hospital. My wife said to me, he does not leave my arms or your arms. That's it.
Because your wife was knowledgeable.
Mm.
She took the time to listen to alternative ideas and then made up her mind for herself as to what seemed reasonable to her. And again, it gets back to nature's design. A small percentage of babies need help. A lot of times they need help because of the way they were brought into the world. So it's iatrogenic. But most babies don't. Most babies should be left alone. The cord should be left intact. The baby should go on the mom's chest, whether that's by C-section or whether that's by vaginal delivery. I mean, a C-section, you have to protect the sterile field. I get that. But you can work it out. Or you could have delayed cord clamping, and then the mother could have the baby right here. The baby doesn't need to go over to the warmer where 3 strangers from the pediatric department upstairs are coming down to do all these things to your baby while mom is sitting behind a curtain not being able to see or relate to her baby. Again, these are just policies that have been put in place that nobody asks why. Or even if they ask why, they get yelled at for asking why. I still want to ask, why do babies go from a mom in lithotomy position, pushing out her baby, to having a cut cord and go over to the warmer on the other side of the room? That is still protocol in more than half of all hospitals in the world. And the question is why? And if you ask a nurse why they're doing it, they'll say something like, well, it's our policy. Or we have to make sure the baby's okay. Well, can't you make sure the baby's okay right here? No, because I didn't learn to do it that way. And when they get all caught up and they get all agitated because you're messing with their world. And even when their world isn't working well, they don't want you to mess with their world. And if it's working well by design to generate revenue and keep people in power, then those people don't want it to be changed either. Change has to come from women like your wife who have to say, no, you're not going to give my baby vitamin K. You're not going to give my baby a hepatitis vaccine, a shot for a sexually transmitted disease that me and my husband don't have. And you're not going to take the baby away from me because I want to be with my baby. I think it's nature's design is for me and my baby to bond hormonally, sensory, in every possible way. The baby does not need to be wrapped up like a burrito. The baby does not need to go off into another room, that sort of thing. No, going back to your example at the animal park, nobody walks in and takes a baby rhinoceros away from its mother, right? You just don't do it. And even if that baby's struggling, you kind of let nature do its thing. Now, in humans, we want to intervene, but why are so many more babies struggling now than they were 30, 40 years ago? And the system wants to say, oh, women are older, women are fatter, there's, 5G, micro, they want to blame something else. Why don't you take a look at what you're doing first and see and compare it to the same women who are birthing at home? They're drinking the same water. They have the same 5G. They have the same microplastic issues, but their babies and their pregnancies are healthier. Maybe it could be something you're doing. A sane person would think about that and say, yeah, we should look at it. So I can only tell you what the alternative is, that these people are not necessarily sane. They're motivated by something other than outcomes.
All right, Stu, let's promote your podcast.
Okay, it's Birthing Instincts. Everything I have is Birthing Instincts. So it's Birthing Instincts podcast. It's on your podcast app, any one of them. And Bliss Young and I have been doing it for a long time. And we talk about mostly things birth, but we have very interesting guests on. We recently had Del Bigtree on. I don't know. I think hope your listeners know who he is.
I've had him on also.
Yeah. Yeah, you've had him on, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's just, we don't always do birth, but we sort of did focus on birth, but then Del went off on a tangent, which I loved because he just went on to a rant, and it was great because I'm usually the one that goes off on a rant. So that was kind of a relief for me.
No.
Yeah, of course. So we have that. And then my website is birthinginstincts.com, where you have links to where I'm teaching. I go around the world and I teach a 2-day seminar on breech and twin skills. It's been very well received. I do 10 to 12 of them a year. So that's on the website. We have a Patreon membership at the podcast website, which is birthinginstinctspodcast.com. And you can join our Patreon. We have about we're up to about almost near 2,000 people. Very different levels. So some are basic free, and then there's the very more expensive levels where we have extra content. You can see our podcast without commercials. You can see us on video. We do supplemental stuff that we put up for the podcast. We do segments, and I do a deep dive every now and then on a topic. And it's a sense of community. We have a peer review once a month where people can come talk openly. You get CEU credits for that. We have a Q&A once a month, and people can come on and just ask questions, and you get a bunch of birth workers giving you answers, that sort of thing. Bliss has what's called a village prenatal. So she does that once a month where people can come on and they do like what a prenatal visit would be like, and they go through that, and everybody chimes in, and it's a sense of community where people can air out their grievances or their experiences, or share a wonderful story or maybe a tragedy. And Bliss and I will occasionally do debriefing with people who had an outcome that wasn't great, whether it's a birth worker or a family themselves, and give them an ear and a shoulder to lean on. So that's what we do. And then I published some papers. I'm sort of working on books, but I don't really want to talk about them yet because I'm not sure how far I'll get on them. But one of them will be on twins, because I really do think that this is an area where the medical system has failed miserably with twins. Pretty much everything they recommend about twins is not evidence-based, or not good evidence-based, and it's not supported. And there certainly are other options, and you wouldn't know it if you went to your typical maternal fetal medicine doctor, who again treats everybody the same on an algorithm. And every woman with twins is an individual, and medicine doesn't like that. Their system isn't designed to deal with individuals. It's designed to work on volume and move people through. It's assembly line, algorithmic. So that's my mission in life. And then so that's it. Birthing Instincts. You'll find me.
And your podcast, I'll reiterate, is very special to me and my wife. So I can only recommend it. But on that very uplifting note, Dr. Stuart Fischbein, thank you for joining me in the trenches.
Jeremy, it's always a pleasure. Looking forward to coming to South Africa at some point.